All right. Welcome back to a next episode of Building Software Better. We got a fun guest today, someone I've known for quite a long time, Scott Davenport. Scott, just a little bit about, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Lived in North Carolina my whole life. I'm father of three kids, 17, 13, and 9. Long time tech guy. Enjoy all things gadgety and talking about tech all the time. I just live what I do every day. So yeah,
Now, you work for Pinpoint right now. Is that correct?
I do. You hired me, which is
I
awesome.
did. No, we
Yeah,
worked together for, this will be, I guess, technically our third company if you include the acquisition company. But
yeah,
how did
that's
how
right.
did how did we get started together? And when was it? Do
Yeah,
you remember?
it was 2013.
Okay.
I had done a couple of stints at Good Technology through various states of their business and kind of risen up through management. You guys decided it was time to hire an enterprise sales team to come in. I came in as part of that team in 2013 to run solutions architecture, which essentially was a title we brought with us, I think, maybe solutions engineering. And I took over a team of what were not sales engineers, which was kind of my background. They were all developers. They were building apps, and the transition was happening to where we were trying to go out and sell this platform. And so I came in during that time, and actually was I think a few levels below you, starting to build this team out and try and see how things could go. And it was cool. I mean, I got to learn a lot. Obviously, it was my first real close working with developers. And understanding the mindset of developers and how you lead them, especially not being a developer. That was always something that joining Accelerator was a challenge for me. It was like, how do you lead developers when you're not technically coding? And so came in and built what I think was a really strong team. And through some transition times, you called me one day and said, "Hey, could you come and report to me and let's go fix some things?" And I took the challenge, and I think that started our really close relationship at that point. We'd obviously known each other prior to that.
And you ended up before we sold the company, you were running product, you were running support, you were running,
Training.
a lot of different stuff, right?
I was, yeah. I mean, it was one of those things where we decided it was time to kind of batten down the hatches and get things moving in the right direction. It was what needed to be done, which was kind of interesting because at the time I had primarily been in sales engineering and these sales customer facing roles, but this was the first time I started to take on a number of things internally, externally focused, process oriented, kind of running the daily in and out of the business. And at the time, I didn't really think about it. It was just kind of doing what needed to be done. But as we've kind of evolved here at Pinpoint, it's become what I call operations, which is you can kind of define it however you see fit. It's knowing that things need to get done and how to run the business kind of from end to end. So it's been a lot of fun in that
Now,
capacity.
prior to Accelerator, good. You say you weren't sort of a developer or managed developer, but you
Yeah.
have a technical background and sort of tell us a little bit about like networking and some of the things you did prior to that.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. I'll tell it quickly, but kind of how I got into technology in general. I just remember growing up, I was kind of an introverted kid and, played golf. It was kind of a lone sport I could do. And my dad had I think it was a Tandy TRS 80, which
Yep.
was
Trash
essentially
80, we called it.
a DOS prompt with
Yep.
not a lot going on for it and no internet or anything like that. And somebody bought me for Christmas a book on coding, and it was essentially like a little risk game where you said, I want to send this many troops into this territory. It would go do some things and come back and spit out, you lost this many troops and they lost this many troops. Do you want to battle again? And it was just kind of this logical progression. And so I was interested, but in the early 90s, didn't really know much about computers. I was like, this is pretty cool and fun. But went off to college and my mom bought me a 486DX, which was a math code processor. It was like, oh my
Mm-hmm.
gosh, you can put images on this thing? And like, this is amazing. And these super slow internet speeds, AOL discs coming in the mail every day. And I'm in college and I'm an accounting major. And I was like, this is kind of, don't like accounting. Not a spreadsheet, not a numbers guy, balance sheet guy. I could never make those two things add up. So I was really frustrated in college, and in my spare time, I started taking apart this computer my mom had bought me and replacing the stuff inside, seeing what's happened with the motherboards. Like, how is this? How am I getting internet? And it just became super intrigued, and started really tearing those things apart. Kind of one day working in retail in college, and a buddy of mine said, if you're taking apart computers in 94, 95, why in the world are you an accounting major? Like, it seems kind of ridiculous. And so I said, it does. And I went the next day and I changed my major to information systems and operations management, which was the closest thing I could find to computers at the time at UNC
That's right.
Greensboro, which is where I went to college. And it was kind of a mixed mash of all kinds of things. And then I was like, my first introduction to coding was COBOL. So, and I was like,
that'll
this
keep you
is
from
terrible.
going. Yeah, that'll keep you from being a
Oh
programmer.
man, I was just like, I don't get this. It was at the time right before Y2K, so they were really training up a lot of
Oh
engineers
yeah.
to go out and solve this problem. So, for me, I was like, well, this is a problem, and they don't want me solving it. I mean, I was a mess, but I still had this extreme interest in hardware, and particularly like how packets get from here to around the world in instance, and so went took a job I went to CompUSA, sold hardware. Really, obviously, I had this trailer or this trunk I carried around literally to about 5 years ago. My wife made me give it up, but it had motherboards and memory and video cards, and I could Frankenstein anything out of it, and I just loved it. I mean, that's what I did in my spare time was built these things, and so got interested in it. Took some Cisco and Microsoft courses over the course of a couple of years after I took a job as a IT handyman, I guess, putting those things, putting networks together, and got my certification on the job, which was awesome. I've never had it any other ways. You know me now, like I got to get my hands in it. There's books are fine, and learned a lot in books, but over the course of 2 years, I think I took 20 some exams, got certified in Microsoft, Cisco, everything I could get my hands on, and fell in love with it. And so that was how I really got interested in technology and love of making things work. So.
And how was the transition then, sort of in some ways, from hardware? You kind of were brought up, if you will, in hardware, and then eventually you kind of went and I guess you worked for Good, and they weren't really before Good. Maybe you had some other things you were doing, but Good was, if you're not familiar, was a sort of mobile company, one of the very first early mobile kind of companies. Now, were you working in hardware, like in the Trio and things like that, before you kind of went over to the software world, or?
No, this is one of those career moments, right, where you're just thankful you have friends. So I was in the IT closet, and it was, I loved it. I mean, I really did. But eventually I was just like, there's got to be something more to this. It was me and these two guys. And I was like, I don't know what I want to do next. And I actually started interviewing for all kinds of jobs. I interviewed at big companies to go install desktops as part of my job. A buddy of mine said that, hey, Good Technology is opening an inside sales office in Raleigh. And I was like, but you know me, man, I can't hardly talk to people like sales. Like, I don't think this is going to work. And so, but I was like, I'll go interview because I was interested. I was ready to get out of Greensboro. So I went and interviewed. Needless to say, I would love to tell you that I interviewed and they said, hire this guy. But they actually said, no way, this guy can't sell. But somebody went to bat for me and said, trust me, I know the guy. If you get to know him, he can. And man, I went in as an SE there, and I found a love of taking. I was always every time while I was learning, I would come home, and surprisingly, my wife's been married to me for over 20 years because I would come home and tell her in layman's terms what I learned today, and it just helped me solidify in my own mind, kind of how things worked. And so this idea of taking complex technologies and explaining them simply so somebody will buy it came really natural to me. So that was how I made that transition. Yeah.
That's cool. And then, like, it's interesting that, I want you to tell the story, but, you seem to have this sort of lifelong passion for learning and kind of improving yourself, and then obviously helping, you're one of the better managers I've ever worked with, managing people, especially technical people. You have a lot of empathy for them, and you kind of understand them. And how did, tell us about, because it seems like, in the last, couple of years, it seems like you're getting more into sort of learning how developers build software, sort of yourself, like actually doing it yourself. Obviously, you've been doing this for a while, but like, I know you're not a day-to-day programmer or anything like that, but I mean, what's that all about?
Man, it's really been a fascination with what you guys can do with an idea and what you can turn it into. And I've had so many fits and starts with it. You've known several of them. I committed to my team actually at Accelerator. The first time that I really went down and wrote code was that by the end of this quarter, I was going to have an application written in titanium on the App Store. It was terrible, but I did it. It worked. And I had a lot of guys around me that were helping me, which was awesome. I think it garnered a lot of empathy from the team that I was willing to go try and figure this out. And so there were numerous fits and starts. I mean, even I would take courses on Udemy. I would just try it and I would get confused. And there's kind of that, the developer, like, this is exciting. This is fun. This is, oh my gosh, hard. And I don't know anything. And I don't even know if it's knowable, kind of those ups and downs. But I've always been fascinated with it, always been interested. I've had different talents and different skills. I think that at the time in my career, lent myself to doing the things I was doing. So I never looked back really. I just kind of look forward and see what I can do now that I have this opportunity. And actually, when I quit my job without a job from Accelerator Axway at the time, I went to the Iron Yard, which I don't think they're in existence anymore, but I went there for and went for a couple of months there. Did a web, kind of basic web, HTML, CSS, no helpers, no, just learn how it works at a base level. And
now, what is the
Yeah, go ahead.
Iron Yard? Tell us about what the Iron Yard is. Since they're
Yeah,
not
so the
around
Iron,
anymore.
yeah, so this was which is interesting. Is kind of, I guess I was right at this transition where there were still on-site places you could go and either do a 3-month boot camp, or in my case, you could do a month of nights, essentially 2 or 3 nights a week, where you would go to a campus, sit with the class, go through the learnings, build sample projects, all that, and it was $1,000, $2,000, something to that effect. But so that's what Iron Yard was. I went there, we coded, we had a community. That was really what it was about, trying to build community and get kind of junior developers ready to go into the workforce. We were there.
Okay, so it's a coding boot camp, effectively.
A coding boot camp, yep. And that was one of those times when I quit my job and I committed myself. I wasn't just going to sit around. I was going to go try and do something new, and I committed myself to that. I took then went and paid $10 for an online Udemy course. It was 50 hours, and took that over the course of a couple of months. And my challenge was always I never had a practical application, and I didn't really have like an idea and turn it into something. I just hadn't had that. And so anyway, that's kind of where I found myself, was not having that kind of place to anchor myself and go move a project forward and learn. I went back and did my day job, I guess. So.
Now you've got a pretty long career now, sort of building teams and managing lots of people, and especially technical people now. I mean, you've managed many dozens of 40, 50 people, I think, at Accelerator or something like that. And then sort of beyond. But I mean, what is sort of the drive to sort of, it feels like you're kind of going backwards. Is that not the case? I mean, what is the drive to sort of learn, to sort of do the development side versus just continue to grow as a great manager and sort of take on more and more responsibilities? I mean, you've continued to, I know here at Pinpoint in the last, year and a half, you've taken on more finance and HR and sort of other areas that are beyond, if you will, the technical areas that you've always traditionally been great at. I mean, what's sort of the drive then to sort of do this other thing? Is it just purely, wanting to create something and be part of that, or what is it?
Yeah, it's different. And interestingly enough, I think this time it's kind of twofold. It's one, some of the transitions we made internally have made our application a lot more approachable to me personally. And I don't like not knowing. I think things are knowable if you care to know them. So, I choose to kind of dig in and understand them. And then the other thing that kind of has hit me recently is I feel like coding is independence to a degree, where if I can learn this skill and I can take what's in my head and put it into code, and other people use that, and I can potentially sustain my family with that, right, over the course of time. Obviously, we're going to build this company and we're going to go kick some ass, but at the end of the day, and I'll code and do whatever I can to make that happen too. But at the end of the day, I got a long career in front of me, and I got to think about like what I really want to go do after this, and because there's always after, or most times there's after, right? You hope there's after. So for me, kind of just making sure that when I come out, I can be an executive, I can be a coder, everything in between. I think it just opens up a lot of opportunities.
So it sounds a little bit like it's an optionality thing, as well as sort of understanding what's going on. I mean, it's sort of twofold, because you talked about both, right? You talked about, the next thing is sustainability and independence and all that. And sort of on the flip side, you talked about really wanting to know what's happening. Does that sound about right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I've got to know what's happening. It's super hard for me. I mean, I've always, even when I took over engineering, and you and I had this discussion, because, I just come at you frank when I have concerns, like, how am I going to do, I can't go in and say, we should be using this technology and connecting it this way and doing all these things. But I think the relationship you and I have, and we've formed over these years, is we very much have a synergistic relationship where I know what I know and I know what I don't know. And,
Right.
we work really well on that. And so the more I can come toward you, I obviously want to do that. And that's just understanding more about how coders think and what's hard, what's not hard. Even just having that ability to say, like, something, never say anything's easy in engineering. I'm confident. I know that's a terrible thing to say, right? But knowing the things that are doable today versus things we need to put some more thought and timing into, and understanding kind of all the implications of that. So it's helpful across all those spectrum.
Right. Do you remember your first commit? I mean,
I do actually.
Commit.
It's so funny. It was an awesome. I brought an API key in from Google.
Was it Maps?
The measurement service. It was Google Analytics into the first I brought into our. This is the first commit to our application.
Okay, when did that happen?
It was on December 1st of 2020, and
2020.
it was the most fanfare. Yeah, 2020.
Oh, you mean this past
couple months? Yeah.
Couple months ago. Okay, it's
not a few months ago.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure I made other updates, but this was kind of the first time I was like, okay, I'm going to have this code running on my machine. I'm going to create the PR. I'm going to push it in the kind of the engineer way, and it was probably the PR that had the most fanfare we've ever had. I think I had eight approvers and a lot of excitement in Slack. So, but many more since then, and hopefully continue to have many more as we go forward. But.
Now you went from sort of API key PR to what's sort of the most complicated thing you've done so far?
I think probably what I'm working on right now, which is instrumenting Google Analytics and the events, and I think the interesting thing about that, obviously, throwing a line for an event in is nothing. It's a handful of characters or whatever. But for me, it's because I've been taking recently another course on React and Redux. It's really helped me to be able to go in and find where's the proper place to put these events, right? You can put them in a lot of places, and we had some interesting places. But the understanding the ramifications of having them in areas, being able to walk the logic of the code and kind of get to the root of it and understand where the best place to do things. It's been, it's certainly been nice to be able to do that and do it with confidence, to know that I'm finding the right areas and got a lot to learn, but that's probably the most complicated thing, just because I'm going through a lot of the code now. Yeah.
Right. And you're having to sort of understand it versus just paste here, someone saying, put the key in here, like config file, versus saying, okay, you got to really know kind of what the logic is and what the app's doing, so you can put it in the right place.
Right.
So you definitely graduated from, sort of point and click to a true understanding of what the software is doing and how the code reads and all that.
Yeah, and the Git flows. You and I talk about that a lot. I think a lot of what engineers do, and what I didn't have a true appreciation for, was like understanding, how often do you commit? How often do you push PRs? How often, when do you have them in draft? When do you have them in these other states? Of course, I understood it from a fundamental level. I'm just saying, when you get down to the command line and you're trying to do this and communicate to others what you're trying to accomplish, that was something I spent some time on, like trying to really understand the Git flow. And you spent some time with me, helping me out with that, as others do internally. I mean, you have a very gracious team that takes a lot of time with me through my silly questions sometimes.
Right. Okay. So what's next then? I mean, where do you go from here? You just took this Udemy course. Tell us a little bit about that, because you've been raving about that. I talk to you about that literally every day, it seems like. So, and as opposed to, multi-$1,000 boot camp thing, and then now you've taken some Udemy course that, was $50 or something, right? It was like fairly inexpensive.
Yeah.
Wow. And it seems like you've learned a lot, and sort of like me watching you over the last month, it seems like you've really gone from having a broad understanding of how things work to having now like a working knowledge and be able to do it yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I choose Udemy because, man, is it cheap, and you can learn anything. And that's what I really believe. Like, if you truly want to learn it, you can learn it. And this is one of those things. I went out, and it's a 42-hour course, and it's, across 2 technologies. Obviously, being able to take it on my own time is a huge part of it. I mean, the boot camp was a commitment because it was a drive 2 or 3 times a week, and you had to leave at a certain time. And, there's nights I'm up, as till 12, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning and doing the class. And so it's more on my time. It's also bite-sized chunks, 5 or 6 minute increments of videos. It's not an hour-long lecture, and then you got to go home and kind of try and process all that. It's hands on the keyboard constantly, which I love. It's certainly, I think, on my 6th app now in this course. We're building a Twitch TV app now.
Wow.
With RTMP and stuff. So, it's just fun and seeing stuff work. It's always been the thing, I guess, kind of my drug with technology is, a router's not routing and now it's routing. I did that. I fixed that. And it's kind of the same thing, seeing things turn on, seeing things light up. So for me, it's just going to be this continued pursuit. I think what I appreciate this time more than anything is coding is a journey that probably lasts a lifetime. And it's not something you're going to wake up one day and go, I know it. Well, maybe one day, like you're pretty close to, but for me, until you're always learning something new. And I know even you, right? You're always finding new packages, new ways people are doing things, new technologies that exist. And I just think it's an ever evolution of learning, which I love personally.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't end. I've been writing software for about 37 years, so 38 years almost. And it doesn't, like you said, it's sort of good, bad. I mean, it changes every day, literally. And so you have to sort of keep up with it. But that also becomes sort of this addiction too. Is like, there's always new stuff. If you like change, you sort of like new things, and it's just a sort of lifelong pursuit, and I always tell people I would do that. My first programming job when I got out of the military was $9 an hour. And I would have done it if they'd, paid me $1 an hour, I love doing it. I started programming when I was 12. So, funny side historical note, you talked about the TRS-80, we called it the trash 80. Our high school got a TRS-80 when I was in 9th grade. And the typing teachers back then, we used to have a typing class, mechanical, keyboard typing. And the teachers didn't know, what a computer was. So I did. And I actually taught the class, TRS-80s is funny. Yeah. So, but it's a lifelong pursuit. And in some ways you learn something every day as a software engineer. So that's what I love about it. You can have as much knowledge as I have, or as anybody has been doing it as long as I have. And still every day you can learn something brand new.
Yeah. And you said change. I think for me, like, I love it. Like people, I know some people don't, and you want the same thing every day. I would just be totally bored ultimately if I couldn't just see the advancements and see things moving and be ready for the next challenge and the next thing that's coming. I mean, I think you do have to be willing change. Like, code gets deleted. We always talk about the time the best line of code you write is when you delete. So, I mean, for me, it's really just about evolving and just keeping up with that and not being afraid to change.
That's probably why you like startups. And you've been in quite a lot of startups, big and small, right? I mean, is that sort of like, is that sort of been by design, like you really are looking for these fast growing sort of energetic sort of companies, or it's just sort of been a sort of train you got on, it's hard to get off?
Yeah, I think I gravitated toward it because I'm always in the pursuit. And early in my career, I admit my pursuit was the next rung. How do I go from SE to manager to director to VP to executive to running a company? And you realize along the way that that's such a flawed logic, such a flawed pursuit, I guess. And the pursuit's really to kind of learn a lot of different things and to understand kind of broad things. I mentioned earlier about that job that I almost took, which was going to install desktop computers at a big company in Greensboro, which I was fascinated by at the time, which is, may sound boring, but at the time it was like, connecting networks and printers and all these types of things I was super interested in. And then there was a small company, never heard of, nobody, even if I said the name, you wouldn't even be able to find them. And they say, can you come work on our computers and migrate from NT4 to Active Directory? And by the way, can you work on our PBX system and our printers and our voicemail system and all this type of stuff? And I said, yes. Because just for me, it was kind of, you got to have that end-to-end understanding. I didn't want to go just work on routers. I didn't want to just go work on desktops. I wanted to kind of have a broader understanding. So, yeah.
Nice. So, we've worked together a long time. What is, you talked a little bit about, how do we communicate? I mean, how would you describe our style, our communication?
I'd say give and take. A lot of good ideas that transpire back and forth. A lot of long conversations that kind of sometimes, I don't know, it just sparks this innovation, this ideation. I think, you can communicate what you need in whatever tone of the day. Like, we're kind of having those conversations, right? And I can take that and turn it into action. And I think that's something that you and I, very much, you run at a very high RPM, which I love and appreciate. I am certainly a high motor guy, but my RPMs are probably a little slower, right? So I can take in a lot of information, and you can give a lot of information out, and I can not miss a lot of things. So I think that's where you and I are really good together, and I think we cover each other's weaknesses and strengths equally well.
Yeah, absolutely.
What would you say? I'm curious what you say.
Yeah, no, I would absolutely agree. I mean, you like to sweat the small stuff, and you're really good at a lot of those details, operational details, and you're very organized. And like a lot of people that are sort of creative and technical and whatever, some of those things I could care less about. So I mean, I care about them at the macro level, obviously, like any sort of anybody in business would, but I sort of know that that's a weakness of mine. Someone else is going to be way better at figuring these things out. And that's something I think you're pretty good at, and and I'm pretty good at sort of the other parts of it. So yeah, you said like you said, it's a sort of we cover each other's strengths and weaknesses pretty well, and we communicate a lot. I mean, I think it's always been my challenge is, sort of what's in my head and kind of what's sort of I'm having my sort of third or fourth or fifth iteration down the road is hard to sometimes communicate, and you have to communicate with people that understand it, over a period of time, right? Because it evolves, right? And you have to sort of have a special long-term relationship with somebody that there's a lot of trust and vulnerability. And I think we have that, so it makes it easier for me because we can talk about things and we're already up to speed. You sort of understand sort of where I'm coming from, and some of the sort of I can shorthand with you a lot of things that maybe I couldn't do with someone else. It's it just takes, because that's a relationship thing. It takes a lot of time to sort of. It's like having a spouse, right? I mean, you can sort of over time, good or bad, you sort of over time become very comfortable, understand sort of each other really, really well. And so you want to be careful you don't take that for granted in any relationship. But I think for us, that's what we have, and I enjoy it a lot.
And I think that's what I love about the operations role too, is it's kind of a role that gets to mold to the CEO that, and we kind of fill the whole 360-degree view of the world, if you will, but we each take the chunks that make the most sense for one of us. And that's why I think it's a cool position. It's something that fits a lot of the things we talked about here, like the appeal to me is it's ever evolving. And I think that's the same with kind of how you and I work together. It's as I learn more and new things, I take on more, and you always give me that opportunity too, which is cool.
What's the thing you dislike the most, and not just specifically, in our so our current situation or current, job or anything like that, but I mean, sort of, what's the thing is like, I hate doing that.
Oh, something I never want to, oh man. Well, I've actually come to not, find travel really inefficient. That's something that and you and I talked about a lot.
Sales, it's funny coming from a sales engineer and someone in the sales background who used to travel a lot.
I paid my dues is what I'll say on that, but I'll also say just what I saw was just the inefficiencies in that, and I think I get it. Like personal relationships, and I certainly hate where we've been for the last year more than anybody, even though I am an introvert. So the world kind of came to me. I've been remote work for 15 years and all that stuff. But it's tough. Really
travel. So what do you think happens? I mean, someone's been a long career in sort of the sales engineering, sales operations, sales, supporting the sales team, especially enterprise like sales people, that, you have to sort of have, 3 or 4 people on site to, sort of do anything. Right. I mean, what do you think happened? I mean, post COVID, I mean, obviously with COVID, we all know what's going on with that. Right. But, like, let's say we're 2 or 3 or 4 years down the road now from, we're back to whatever normal is. What does normal look like in 3 or 4 years in enterprise software selling?
I don't know. I think I hope what it's given people an appreciation for is how much you can do without the face to face. Not that we need to eliminate it, but that
Mm,
we don't need to do it for every single instance. I mean, at the time, I didn't have access to kind of the higher level numbers like the cost of a customer acquisition when I was at Good, for example. But I could do enough math, go to enough dinners, go to enough, fancy things and fancy hotels to go, man, that expense report was 6 grand and we sold $5,000. That doesn't work. And I think for me, that's where I kind of saw inefficiencies. And I think that's where my operational mind kind of kicks in. And I think
right.
that for me, that's what it's about to me. I don't hate travel. I don't want to do it for the sake of it. I don't want to do it to say I'm busy. Like, oh, I was on a plane 1,000,000 miles this year. Somehow that's some badge of honor. I do it when it makes sense. I'll do it anytime, as you know. I'll do it at the drop of a hat. You call me many times, and I'm on a plane in 24 hours. I don't have a problem. But I always want to ask why. Why is that the most effective way to do it? Why is that the most efficient way to do it? It caused me a lot of bumps along the road with some people because I've done this for a long time. I've questioned that, and oftentimes it's because the account manager has a quota and we got to go get this number. And that's not an answer to me, but that's
Right.
I would still do it. I mean, I'm not going to say I sat with my feet on the ground saying I'm not getting on a plane. I mean, I did it, but I always challenged and always questioned, I guess.
So how does it
And I hope
change?
this
I
will.
mean, I mean, like, yeah, there's still going to be enterprise sales reps out there, and they still need their
Mhm,
quotas and sort of
mhm.
three-legged sales cycles. Are they going to go away? Are they going to change in the world of Zoom and Slack and whatever comes
Yeah,
next? I mean, because relationships are still important, like you said. There's
they
nothing
are.
like breaking bread and having a wine with a customer after a big deal.
There's
I
not.
mean, how do you sort of like reconcile? Obviously, that's got its own costs, like you talked about, and
Mhm.
inefficiencies and whatever. But there's some positives to it as well. So how do you
Yeah,
kind of reconcile
absolutely. I guess I reconcile it because you mentioned like a multiple legged sales call. Like it's one thing to send a representative from an organization somewhere. And I think we'll probably see more of this just because I believe it's more acceptable now that we're here on a video call and this is a form of communication that does have value and merits in and of itself.
Right.
So, there were times when you and I have seen the plane tickets bought. There's 4 people going to wherever, and you're going, do we all 4 need to be here?
Yeah.
So I think there's more. First of all, it's a more accepted way to communicate now. So I
Yeah.
think and hope people will look at their processes and say, yes, we still need to, get together, see each other, break bread, as you said. But do I need to take my technical person everywhere? I always said as an SE, like I can be on 5 calls in one day if I'm sitting in my house, and I can be all over the country, maybe 6. But if you take me on a plane, I'm gone for
Right.
3 days, and 2 other salespeople lost access to me. So there's a cost, there's an opportunity cost, not just a monetary cost, right? To having your technical
Right.
people in the field, especially when it came to sales engineering. So that was always kind of my point was not that I don't want to be there, that I'm not good at it, I enjoy it, that type of stuff. It was just, is it the best way to achieve the goal?
Yeah, it seems like the Zoom sort of normalizing Zoom for a lot of things. I mean, put aside sort of the company Zoom. I'm more talking about the verb Zoom. Sort of
Mhm.
this idea that we can. I mean, we've had video for a long, long time, as you know. Like we've done it for we did it for engineering. We did it for
Mhm.
a lot of things prior to COVID, but sort of having it much more universally accepted, especially as a
Yeah,
business
that's right.
thing. I mean, I've seen it even in sort of fundraising and startups, like this idea that you can raise money without ever, stepping foot on Sand Hill Road and doing the sort of up and down, pitch things is sort of, 3 or 4 years ago, it might have been hard to imagine, but
Mhm.
clearly the world continues, and
Yeah.
and a lot of those people found that wow, there's access to lots of people outside of
Mhm.
Silicon Valley, and all of a sudden, like our deal process maybe is a lot more efficient, and much more interesting, and the access to really great, sort of talent and things like that. So
Yeah.
I think that's sort of we've seen it permeate, sort of all over. Sort of the idea of having a big deal and then doing a Zoom presentation 3 years ago to like win a big 200, 300, $400,000,
Mhm.
deal seems crazy, right? I mean,
No
especially
way. Can't be
not to
done, right?
us.
Like,
Yeah, not to
not really.
us,
Yeah.
right? Because we understand it, but I'm talking more on the sales sort of
Mhm.
side of things. Like you said, no, it can't be done. We got to be there in person. Must win deal, quarters closing. but now I think normalizing that will drive some people mad probably, but others I think on both sides, because I always said like the customer also has to give up a lot of time and a lot of energy
Yeah, that's right.
all that. It's not just us getting on planes as well. It's them, right? It's an
They got to
obligation.
get you in the building. They're obligated to go to lunch with you.
Right.
Now,
Right.
something that was 30, 45 minutes turns into half a day. And,
Right.
I just wonder how much do we lose?
And you and I talk about that. Yeah, you and I talk about that a lot about software. It's like, man, these old school ways of like, we've talked about this in the last year a lot. We're trying to buy some software and they want to get us on the phone and they want to talk and they want to do the thing. And we're like, look, we want to buy your software. Why can't we just buy your software? Why do I have to do that? Why can't you give me a price and and let me have it, right? And so I do think we're going to see a big shift in that, because this whole idea, I don't want to spend an hour on the phone with you going through your deck. I've already built something with your technology. I mean, we were talking about this recently. Is like, we've already built some prototype. We've got an API, and there's this discontinuity between sometimes, not always, but more, the older, seem like companies, where you can get access to their API or sample apps or whatever and be enabled, but then their go-to-market motion, their sales, their kind of machinery is like old school, right? It's like, okay, there's some discontinuity between there. You need to align those, and I know it's hard for companies in transition, in this sort of newer model, but as a buyer, often I'm like, I don't want to get on the phone with you, HubSpot or whoever it is, right? And spend, an hour going through every quarter to have to talk about something. And again, you run, sort of client success. So we understand, the value of that, but on the flip side, it's a cost as well to both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the customers are more educated than ever, right? I mean, that's what it's so funny. We go through these sales classes and they'd say, look, your customers, your buyers are more educated than ever, but we got to go educate them some more. And I'm like, and there must be better ways to educate them. They're getting educated somewhere. So should we use those avenues and those mediums? And they are. I mean, absolutely fine. Customers knew the competitive landscape. They knew your feature product comparisons better than you did. Like, so it's almost a game of kind of catch you when you got there. So it just seems counterintuitive. If they know that much and they know they want to try it, let them have it.
Exactly. So, okay. So as we transition here and we wrap up, what's sort of like, as sort of an executive who sort of, you're sort of continuing to learn and be on this journey, what would be sort of one piece of advice you give someone maybe like yourself that, maybe they've sort of kind of have a similar career, sort of grown up and managed more and more people and, sort of had a lot of, awesome success, but on the flip side, they just want to do something new, or maybe they just want to learn more about what sort of their team does. What would be your advice?
Man, so there's something I saw. This is probably when I was in my early 20s. It was do something today to make tomorrow easy for yourself. Like it's probably cliche, quote. And some people may have said it, but I mean, for me, it was I would always try to make my sales process more efficient or my spreadsheet more efficient so that I could have more time in the day. It was totally a selfish ambition. So be selfish with your time and kind of pursue the things that are going to make your job easier tomorrow. And then look, if you can do your job in 3 or 4 hours and nobody knows the difference, go kick butt and do that. And, obviously doing things you're passionate about, you're going to spend more time than that anyway doing those. And I think the other thing I would say that I've learned over 15 years of remote work is relationships, building those with people. It takes energy, it takes effort, it takes intentionality, being committed to kind of the growth of your team and the spirit of your team, not just what work you need out of them. I believe my teams know like what's expected of them. We hire great people, right? But what they're looking for me to do is remove all the roadblocks. And I think if you remove roadblocks for people, if you try and get better every single day, then you're going to see you're going to have a lot of fun in your career. And I think I certainly have because of those kind of, I never know everything, and I hope never to. So.
Yeah, well, that's great. Well, thank you, Scott. It's been a pleasure getting to know you over the many years now, and obviously see you on the other side.
Sounds good, man. Thanks.
Thanks.